Hello folks, Tiso here. This video about different teams for Rosaria is a follow-up to the character guide I have for her earlier. The other guide focuses more on Rosaria herself, and this one is about other team members that can help support her. Here's a quick refresher on why Rosaria works on so many teams and builds. Her Ascension 2 passive increases her crit rate whenever she hits someone behind with her elemental skill. This skill will teleport her to the other side of all enemies except for the shielded Mutachurls and the Ruin Guard enemies. Bonus crit rate is always nice to have to increase your DPS, but it also helps her Ascension 4 passive. Whenever she uses her burst, 15% of her crit rate at the time is transferred to all party members. This includes that 12% crit rate you get from the Ascension 2 passive. This Ascension passive gives Rosaria a supporting ability as well as promoting more team swap comps. Her constellations are all pretty nice as well. C1 increases her attack speed and normal attack damage whenever she crits, and you get a lot of crits from her kit. This Constellation 1 really helps out her physical build with the Superconduct team. This also helps on a freeze team with the Chongyun support since you'll be doing a lot of normal attacks for cryo damage. Her Constellation 2 gives her 2 more damage ticks on her burst. This makes her way better than a C0 Kaya. Having more ticks on her burst increases the damage of every build, but it especially increases the melt team damage. Since melt is an amplifying reaction, Rosaria's hard-hitting burst will hit even harder. Constellation 4 is just a nice to have. It increases her energy recharge whenever she crits with her E. It doesn't significantly add damage to any build, but it's a nice quality of life. And her Constellation 6 increases her physical damage a lot. This also helps a lot if she is supporting a physical carry. Since this 20% physical shred activates when the burst hits an opponent, this ability will have 100% uptime, because there's only 3 seconds between the last tick of her burst hitting an opponent and the burst itself coming off cooldown. My damage numbers are not crazy high through the roof like you've seen other videos on YouTube, but I'm just showing that even having modest weapons and artifacts is good enough to do plenty of damage with the right team. Let's start with her physical Superconduct team. In this team, a core member will be either Fischl or Beidou. Fischl's Oz will help make the Superconduct reaction, and also do a lot of damage while Fischl is off the field. If you have Constellation 6, you'll be doing a lot more damage since Rosaria will be doing normal attacks the entire time. Her Ascension 4 passive also gives some bonus damage whenever Rosaria causes the Superconduct reaction. And during this whole time, Oz will be doing good damage by himself while Fischl is off the field and Rosaria is attacking the enemy. The other choice for the core electro unit is Beidou. Her Constellation 2 lets her burst jump more often, causing more damage as well as more electro reactions. She can also cause superconduct reactions with her elemental skill. You don't have to use her elemental skill to counter an enemy. You can just tap it real quick to unleash it and apply electro on the enemy. So here's the team in action. I have Rosaria and Fischl as the core members, Bennett as a healer, and Venti just to be there. Ideally, I would want to use Zhongli, but I don't have him on this account. For Rosaria's weapon, use the Crescent Pike. That 4-star weapon is better than any 5-star option in the game. It's also way better than the craftable Dragon Spine Spear. There are 2 options for artifact sets. You can either go 2-piece Bloodstain with 2-piece Gladiator, or 4-piece Retracing Bolide. I recommend only using the Bolide set if you have Zhongli. His Jade Shield reduces the enemy's physical resistance by an extra 20%. His Ascension 2 passive also increases your shield strength. This will increase the chance of your 4-piece Bolide set's buff being active. This team is pretty easy to use. Just have Fischl send out Oz, then switch back to Rosaria. Use her skill and burst whenever you can to keep applying Superconduct. Then just keep using her normal attack string in between. Rosaria's best 3 combos is 1 normal attack into charge attack, 4 normal attacks, or 5 normal attacks. I prefer the 4 and 5 normal attacks since it's easier, and I can utilize her Constellation 1 passive. And use your healer to help out whenever you are low on health. Rosaria has a lot of base health and is naturally tanky, so even against a Primo Geobishop, I'm not too worried about dodging attacks, so I keep on the offensive. So Rosaria's physical team is not that bad. She can easily finish off a max level Storm Terror in one opening. Now for her freeze team. The core supports for this team are Chongyun and Xingqiu. Both of Chongyun's Ascension passive are super helpful. His Ascension 2 increases Rosaria's attack speed even more when inside his elemental skill. His A4 passive also increases the cryo damage of your team. Both of these abilities are great since Rosaria will be doing a lot of cryo damage with her normal attacks. Speaking of his elemental skill, in case you don't know, Chongyun creates a large AoE circle on the ground. This converts all regular attacks from physical damage to cryo damage. This skill is how we are able to permanently freeze enemies. Oh, and don't sleep on his Constellation 2 either. His C2 will decrease your cooldown when you're inside his elemental skill. This decreases the cooldown of both Rosaria's elemental skill and elemental burst. So here's my fun little perma-freeze team on the last chamber of the Spiral Abyss. This will be even better if I had constellations for Chongyun, but even at C0, the team still works pretty well. For her weapon on the freeze team, use the best non-specialized polearm you have. The best choice is the 5-star Staff of Perma, but you can also use other 5 stars as well. If you don't have a 5-star weapon, use the Blackcliff pole, the Deathmatch, or one of the craftable polearms. Be careful if you are using a deathmatch. Do not use a helmet with crit rate since you'll be overcapped. For artifact, you'll be using the 4-piece Blizzard Strayer set. Since the enemies will be frozen most of the time, you'll be getting that extra 40% crit rate as well as the 15% crit rate from the Cryo Team Resonance. This is why you don't want to run a crit rate helmet since you'll end up having over 100% crit rate and it'll be wasted. By properly rotating through Xingqiu and Barbara's abilities, I can constantly apply Hydro to the enemies. Then being inside Chongyun's elemental skill, I am also applying Cryo. This makes the enemy keep getting frozen again and again. This team is very comfortable to use. The only drawback are against enemies that can't be frozen, like bosses or enemies that have a permanent elemental infusion. Here's another example using Child instead of Barbara. With this team, I do 2 different damage rotations, one with Rosaria and Child, and the other with Rosaria and Xingqiu. I start off with using Rosaria's skill to get some extra crit, and then her burst. Then I just switch to Child and use his melee attacks until Rosaria's burst disappears. After that, I rotate to Xingqiu and use his burst and abilities, then rotate to Chongyun and send out his elemental skill buff. Then I just keep using Rosaria's cryo attacks and abilities until Xingqiu's burst is over. After that, you can use Rosaria's burst again and switch to Child and repeat. It's a nice little rotation that isn't too complex. Sometimes I like to use the freeze team with Rosaria, Chongyun, Xingqiu, and Bennett, and I call that team Rosaria's Daycare.
Who's next?
Rain outlines your fate. Let me weave you a verse.
Swift and merciful.
Yeah! Lights out.
And lastly, I'll be talking about her meld comp. For this team, you will want to have Bennett for his pyro and healing abilities. Then you need a second pyro unit. I personally like Xiangling for this since she is a very good swap support. And the last character, I recommend is Sucrose if you have one leveled up. If not, then just bring any Anemo character. Xiangling's Ascension passive increases Guoba's range from super bad to a little less bad. Her Constellation 4 passive is very nice. It increases the duration of her burst, which means more damage and more melt reactions. And her Constellation 6 also helps out. This is far better for pyro teams, but it's still bonus damage. And her Constellation 1 increases her pyro damage even more with Guoba's little pyro shred. Since this is a melt team with amplifying reactions, Elemental Mastery will help a lot. And that's why Sucrose is the best elemental support for this team. Both her Ascension 2 and Ascension 4 passive increases the team's elemental mastery. And her Constellation 6 increases your elemental damage by 20% if you swirl the correct element. Also, you want to use the 4-piece Vanera set. In addition to Sucrose buffing your team's elemental mastery and elemental damage, the Vanera set will decrease the enemy's elemental resistance. You're getting stronger as the enemy is getting weaker. For Rosaria's weapon, I recommend a Dragon's Bane. If you happen to have a Staff of Homa, you can use that instead. I will rank the Jade Spear and the Skyward Spine to be about the same damage level as the Dragon's Bane, so it's up to your choice at that point. And if you don't have any of those, you can always fall back to Deathmatch, Black Cliff, or one of the craftable polearms. For her artifacts, you want to use 2-piece Blizzard Strayer and 2-piece Noblesse. That will give you the maximum damage you can do with Rosaria's Burst. Here's me with the Pyro team on the last chamber of the Spiral Abyss. For the most part, in the Melt team you can just go ham. You can just keep swapping to different party members as their abilities come off cooldown, and just keep on casting away. Rosaria's Melt team is very swap heavy, so you'll be pushing a lot of buttons, which is good if you like that playstyle.
No, my sword. Lights out. Judgment. Everybody stand. Let's light it up.
And here I'll be showing a more methodical approach against the Cryo Regisvine. I'll be using Venti here instead of Sucrose since I don't have a leveled up Sucrose. I first use Bennett's ult to burst and apply Pyro, use Venti to swirl the Pyro reaction with the 4-piece Vanilla set, use Rosaria's burst after getting a crit buff, and then swap into Xiangling and using her burst. Then I just watch the numbers pop up until the plant dies. And lastly, for Prosperity, I'll be showing a max level Storm Terror being defeated in one opening. And that's pretty much it for my 3 main team variants with Rosaria. As always, thanks for watching and have fun out there, Traveler.